afternoon to all the dignitaries and enthusiastic students present here. I, Gracie Bess, member of Event Management Team of Institutions Innovation Cell of Government College of Engineering Nagpur, on behalf of IIC, welcome you all to this webinar on topic Starting and Scaling Up Your Business from Scratch. Respected guest speaker, Mr. Pratik Ghagave Honorable Principal Dr. Nitin Bhagave sir, Dr. Kshitija Kadam ma'am, President IIC, Institute's NISP Coordinator Dr. JB Randhawa ma'am, and all the faculty members. A hearty welcome to you all. We are honored to have Mr. Pratik Bhagave sir as our guest speaker today. He is a founder CEO of Templars LLP, an electrical engineer, Sydenham Institute of Management alumnus, acquisition engagement and retention strategist, product growth manager at LED School, and a sports enthusiast. Also, he was a part of the founding team at Vibis Ventures Private Limited. He is the youngest speaker we have had till now. So all the students are requested to be free and ask their doubts to him. All questions are equally important. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Before we begin with the session, I request Honorable Principal Dr. Nitin Bhagave sir to say a few words on this occasion.
Yes, good afternoon, one and all.
Good afternoon.
At the outset, I congratulate the Institute Innovation Council and Startup and Incubation Cell for organizing such an important activities. This is a kind of very important as we are already discussing about startup policies of the institute. We are going to establish an incubation and startup cell. In fact, incubation center at our institute. So this is definitely will be helpful to all of us. Further, everyone thinks about how to start the business. In fact, it is very important nowadays. And as our Honorable Prime Minister has announced the startup policy for the country, definitely every one of the technocrats must be involved and must take an advantage of this policy, what exactly this policy is. And under these policies, various engineering institutes and technological institutes such as government or even IITs, NITs, everywhere, such cells, such centers have been established. Under these cells, it is expected to establish a center with the expertise from outside. And as a part of it, Professor Randhawa ma'am, she is looking after it. So as a part of it, we are organizing the webinars of various experts from the field. So this is a very important sort, as I said earlier, that the establishment of business is very important and naturally some inputs are required. And to begin with this, we have organized this today's webinar on starting up and scaling up the business. Definitely, whatever the innovative ideas, when they are converted to business, what we call it as a startup. So once this idea is converted into business, how to scale it up, how to establish it up. This is again an important thing. So from this aspect, Mr. Pratik will be guiding us today, our future entrepreneurs or industrialists. So thank you very much for calling me over here for formal inauguration of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind and encouraging words. Now, I request Mr. Pratik Ghagave sir to take forward the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Gracie. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. Thanks for taking time out on a Sunday afternoon. Uh, Although Gracie has spoken so nicely of me, here's a quick introduction about myself. I'm Pratik Gaugave. Like you all are going to be, even I'm an engineer. I post that I pursued a management degree in finance from Sidnam Institute, Mumbai, uh, and I have a four plus years of work experience, all of it with startups. And my work has got me involved in different verticals, but I discovered my passion truly lies in building products and managing a company's growth. Currently, I'm working on a project. It's a startup which very recently I've started. It's in the warehousing and logistics space. So with the studies and experience that I've gained over the past few years, I'm here to share some insights with you all. In the session, I'll cover how does one startup, and we'll lay emphasis on scaling up your business from scratch, which will include what product growth is all about, its importance, and its importance in today's fast-paced environment. We'll also look at some strategies to grow. Then we'll throw some light on the importance of data, the important matrix that we should look at, and some tools that might come in handy for budding entrepreneurs. And at the end, I'll take some questions if time persists. As a student, I've realized the importance of citing examples and real life cases to understand a concept, and I'll plan to do the same throughout the session. So I hope you enjoy the next 1 hour or so. Without further ado, let's begin. Just presenting my screen. So entrepreneurship, it's a buzzword. It's been doing quite a lot of rounds in the past 10, 15 years, especially. So what does it mean? There are so many definitions to this word, but in the simplest of forms, I think entrepreneurship is basically finding a solution to a problem and devising strategies to make money out of it. So, this is like the most basic definition that I could come up with. There are two types of businesses one can set up. So this is a broad classification, if I may say. So one is a product-based and one is a service-based business. So take, for example, a television. So, a television would be a product-based industry. So, whichever manufacturers, Sony, OnePlus, whichever, are product-based businesses. Whereas, Tata Sky or Digital TV or Jio TV, or all of these are service providers. So they help us watch channels on the television that we brought. So these are broadly two types of businesses that one can set up. Who is an entrepreneur? All human beings are entrepreneurs, in my opinion. Everyone is solving a new problem every day. But having said that, only a handful of us find ways to monetize those solutions. Now, that is what is important. Can you become an entrepreneur? Absolutely. And the good part about us engineers is that entrepreneurship is inherently ingrained within us. We are well versed with solving problems. We know how to do jugaad. We have to deal with the most unlikeliest of the situations. Many influential companies have been founded by engineers. Like, take for example, I'll take some Indian examples. Paytm, Ola, Zomato, Flipkart, you name it. So many of them have been founded by engineers. When can you become an entrepreneur? It's entirely up to you. All you need is courage, a good idea, conviction, and determination to execute. Of course, there are a lot of other skill sets that might be required, but I think a person, if a person has these four skills, all of the others will come inherently. Is it easy to become an entrepreneur? Absolutely not. I mean, entrepreneurship requires sacrifices. It requires you to leave your comfort zone. It requires you to give up the things that you love doing, and you step into a world with full of uncertainties. So of course it requires a lot of courage, and it's definitely not easy. But at the end of the day, failures are fine, but one should never give up. Now let's quickly look at how one can go about setting up a business. So I've put together a four step formula for this. So first is assuming that one has an idea, one thinks that that idea is unique. One should start by going about doing the market research. So when I say market research, so what you need to do is first you need to understand if there is a need. Is there even a need for a product that you're building, a product or a service that you're building? Then you need to identify the audiences who would need it and would they actually pay for it. And you need to study the competition if there are any existing players in the market. So today you might not start up an e-commerce business, something like an Amazon or a Flipkart, because that they've already taken up a lion's share of the market already. So you would not succeed at all, right? So market research is extremely important. Next, you build a B plan. So a B plan, I mean, there are loads of templates you'll find on the internet. But I think what a B plan should cover is your USP, what's your unique selling proposition, your revenue model, how are you going to generate money, and a detailed execution plan. Because I mean, that's how you go about doing any task, right? You first plan and then go about doing it. Similarly, while setting up a business, you have to build a B plan before starting. And just remember, an idea, I mean, when you put together your USP, you put together your plan. I mean, a nice idea is not always a useful one. I mean, that is something that all of us need to keep in mind before starting up a business. Next up is plan your funds, which is, I think, one of the most important aspects of a business, because assuming where all of us are coming from the age and stage that we are at life, we are in life, we are not earning per se, but definitely we can plan our funds, whatever funds we have. So I mean, an important factor or an important way to go about this would be to go lean. So by employing lean startup principles, product developers can gauge consumer interests in the product and determine how the product might need to be refined continuously. So that's what going lean means. And we can start with our savings. Not increasing liabilities right from the beginning. Is going to be definitely helpful. And next is your business formalities. Of course, this is a very, seems very simple, but I think that's the most difficult part of all of this, because there are a lot of legalities involved, right from, finding your company a name, setting up the company and getting the required licenses and permits. And once you're done with all of this, you run a pilot. That's how I am going about my business as well. And in the previous business setups that I've been part of, this is how we'd gone about it. So it's like, you don't go out there. I mean, Flipkart started selling books online first. They didn't right away start selling clothing or any electrical appliances. So I mean, it's a step-by-step process. You start with a pilot, because that's how you don't invest a lot. So yeah, I mean, these are a few steps I think which might help a person while setting up a business. Once like it is easy for us to say once all of this is on paper, we feel that we've done a very good plan. and now, like, we are done with most of our part. But it's not like that. It's just, of course, it's very important putting things on a paper, but what is more important is executing your plan practically. So it is something like this. The journey looks like this. It's a very, it's a cakewalk, but how it actually is like. I'm sure every one of us has played this game, but yeah, it's something like this. There are so many hurdles one might come across, but having said that, one must not be bogged down by these hurdles. One will find ways to deal with them as time progresses. Now, having understood the basics of setting up a business, let's look at scaling up your business rapidly. Also called as product growth. So, what is this product growth all about? So, it's a combination of building a successful product experience and formulating some out of the box strategies to gain customers and drive revenue. The people who help companies achieve a rapid growth, and I'm emphasizing on this word rapid. We'll look at why I'm doing that in the subsequent slides. The people who help companies achieve this rapid growth are called growth hackers. So they are basically different than traditional marketers. So one might say it's just a fancy superlative used for expanding a customer base and increasing revenues without spending a lot. And growth hackers or managers use rapid experimentation. Typically, it is the high-paced startup environment which requires growth hacking. Growth managers are usually tasked with achieving a hockey stick curve. This hockey you see here, it's not a traditional hockey stick. It's a ice hockey stick, so which is flat at the bottom, as you can see, and it increases the growth. The slope here is very the slope is big. For example, I'll take Instagram. So most of us use Instagram, right? So we look at Instagram MAU. So MAU is basically monthly active users. Look how it has increased exponentially over time. Now, what they've done is utterly crazy. Having 14% of the world's total population use your product is just extraordinary. It's an amazing story of how Instagram founders Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger started Instagram. So what they did was they first had built a social network app called Bourbon. So it was for whiskey lovers. After some analysis, they found that the most used feature of their app was photo sharing. They did some more research and found that there were hardly any good photo sharing apps in the market. So after using the same mechanism of these apps and integrating some photo edit features from some other apps, Instagram was born. So this is one of the best examples of pivoting a business, especially for young entrepreneurs. So pivoting. So what pivoting means? Pivoting means changing your business plan or idea. So you start with something, but when and if you find the right opportunity, you change your direction or you pivot. So some other examples, if I may cite, are like Nokia. Nokia we know as a mobile manufacturing company, but instead it started as a paper mill company back in the 1880s. Or Nintendo, the game console Nintendo. I'm not sure if a lot of people know about Nintendo, but it's famous, something like a PlayStation and Xbox. But Nintendo started as a card manufacturing company, and then they later ventured into hotel chains and taxi services before eventually getting into the gaming space. So it's really important. If you see the right opportunity, you should be open or flexible to change your business strategy or business proposition. Is this concept new? definitely not. This, although you might say the word is new, but the concept is definitely not. So let's take the case of McDonald's. So Richard and Morris McDonald, so these two brothers had started it in 1940 as McDonald's hamburger joint. It was called McDonald's Famous Barbecue. It was a barbecue joint. Their business was growing decently. So they were having decent growth year on year, and they had franchised it as well. But it was in the year 1954 when they employed a certain Ray Kroc when they got the hockey stick growth. What he did was he set up McDonald's stores on most interstate highways. They knew that the interstate highways back then were going to be a big thing. So they showed up where they knew that the customers would definitely come in large quantities. So that's what having a growth mindset is like. Why is it necessary? Because all of it, I mean, it has to have some value, right? I mean, we are talking a lot about growth hacking, but why is it necessary? So of course it helps us create a buzz. It helps us stand out because the competition is a lot. You are having so many players in the same industry today. So you need to do something different to stand out. And the third and the most important of all, to raise funds. Because any business cannot sustain itself when funded by oneself, right? It requires some external funding. So you need to reach out to investors to get funds. And when you reach out to investors, this is what they say. I mean, they all they want is money, So they ask you how much revenues have you got in the past year or so, and all they focus on is money. And there's an interesting study that I came across. A study was conducted for a sample of 25,000 early stage companies with at least $50,000 yearly revenue to understand their average forecasted annual growth revenue. It showed that in the first year, a growth rate of 178% almost was forecasted, and 100% in the second and 71% for the third. Now, when you look at the country-wide stats, it becomes even more mind-boggling. In India, a company falling in the same bracket forecasts a revenue growth of almost 1,000% for its first year. So the startups or businesses have to set these targets to attract investment. Otherwise, I mean, it's a very far-fetched thing to get investment. It might seem easy. Okay, I'll formulate a plan. I'll start by myself, and then I'll get somebody to invest in my company. But it's not as easy as that. You have to show these kind of numbers to actually attract investment, and that is why it is very important to hack your way to growth. That is why it's important for all budding entrepreneurs to have a growth mindset. You need to know if your product has what it takes to achieve that growth. You have to think of growth even while developing a product. So, for example, if you want to develop an app where people can book babysitting services on a day-to-day basis. So let's say you need 1 lakh to set up your product and 1 lakh to cover your other expenses. So your total expenses are 2 lakhs. So you need to be sure right from the word go that you can get at least 200 people, let's say, to pay 1,000 rupees to use your service, so as to at least break even, So these are a few things that an entrepreneur needs to keep in mind even before starting up. Now, after having understood the need for growth, let's look at some techniques to achieve it. I'm rushing through all these slides because in the interest of time, I know we have a hard stop at 2:50. So I'll try to cover as much as possible. To get such a rapid growth, it is imperative to clearly monitor the customer life cycle. So there was this guy, Dave McClure, who put together a brilliant framework which is abbreviated as AARRR. So a customer's journey can be put into 5 broad buckets, namely acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. Now, because due to the sound it makes, the matrix is also called as the pirate matrix. Because of the R sound it makes. Yeah, Captain Jack Sparrow would be a happy man. So people have come up with different versions of pirate matrix over the since the time it was formulated in 2007. We'll study this canvas to understand it better. The different stages of the pirate matrix are represented by the gray sections here, and different user cohorts or user segments are represented by the white sections. Now, when you start acquiring customers, what do? You define your target audience and start the process of attracting them to your product. The ones who convert from your reach out become your acquired customers here, and some of them won't have any problems in getting started and will become active customers. Whereas there'll be some who will find the product difficult to use or not useful and would drop off. And some of these active customers would then further go on to fall into the 3R buckets. Customers that don't make the conversion step are captured in the section at the bottom here, which are the lost customers. This is the life cycle of a user, of a customer. This can be employed across any business, if it's an online business, if it's an offline business, a business related to real estate, a business related to e-commerce, anything. And this is a marketing funnel. This marketing funnel might vary for different companies. Now, let's emphasize on each of the stages. First is acquisition. So this is the first step and arguably the most important one. If you don't have customers, you won't generate revenue. I mean, it's as simple as that. Companies have been employing different tactics over the past few years, or since the start. Since people started setting up businesses to acquire customers. Sometimes even burning a lot of cash in the process. From TV commercials to billboards to digital ads. Our generation has seen it all. But growth hacking is all about how you can get customers at an extremely low or even a zero cost of acquisition. So the definition of acquisition, in fact, can be different for different companies. For an app-based company, a customer would be acquired if he or she downloads the app. Whereas for an FMCG company, it might happen when the first purchase is made. So there are many ways to growth hack your way to acquire customers. I'll cover some of them, some of the best ones that I've come across and I've employed myself in my past experiences. So first is the product-led growth. So there is nothing better than getting your product to market itself. So you don't have to spend any money whatsoever to market your product. So let's look at the story of Apple iPods. iTunes was a revolutionary feature they brought in along with iPods. But it was not that. It was a small design change which sent iPods into the sky. The color of the earphones. So when iPods was launched in early 2000s or mid 2000s, headphones or earphones were traditionally of black colors. What Apple did was they changed the color of earphones and made them white. So that was very very new, or that would make their product stand out. What happened was by making their headphones white, Apple made sure that everyone would recognize them. The ones who bought iPods became their walking advertisements, so they didn't have to spend a single penny on advertisement. They already had an amazing product in iTunes, and now their customers had become walking advertisements, that too free of cost. So nothing like it. I mean, and the revenue shot up like anything. And we know like what revolution Apple iPods have created. Next is paid growth. So it's like incentivizing users to sign up. You know what, something like what Google Pay or players like these have done. Many people think that giving away free cash is just burning cash and not really that fruitful. But it certainly worked for PayPal. The company used referrals to grow their business by almost 7 to 10% on a daily basis. That's crazy. But of course, there was a cost to it. So they asked users to refer their product to their friends, and accordingly they incentivized people. So they spent almost around $60 million to incentivize existing users to refer others. That's a huge amount, of course. But if you are to look at their valuation, so that was just a drop in a glass if compared with the company's eventual valuation of almost 48 billion dollars in 2015. So that is again, like I call an amazing growth hack which PayPal employed. Another one is cross posting. So cross posting is basically, how can we leverage the reach of other companies for our growth. Let's look at what Airbnb did. So Airbnb, we all know what Airbnb is. So it's into the hospitality industry. So what they did was, back in 2009-10 when they started off, so they were a very small company. Today their valuation is in billions, right? But when they started off, they were a very small company. And they were not known by a lot of people. So they tried to leverage the reach of some other company. So this company was Craigslist. So Craigslist for the US is something like OLX or Quikr, how OLX or Quikr is in India. So it has the listings of all products, all properties, or everything. Everything is listed on that website. So what they did was, so Airbnb allows users to book a hotel or rather a bungalow or a place to stay, right? So because their users very few in number, they knew that Craigslist was touching almost 10 million users in a month. So they developed a mechanism which helped their users, or hosts as they call it. So they could list their property even on Craigslist, but all of the transactions on all of the booking process used to happen via the Airbnb's platform. So the traffic, they started driving traffic from Craigslist to Airbnb, and that's how today they are like a multi-billion-dollar industry. These are very small things that people employ during their early stages, but eventually, land up doing like something extraordinary. Another growth hack I like is the freemium model. So it's like, try before you buy, as many people call it. The best example I think all of us use, it's of the tech giant Google. What they did with Google Drive. So Google Drive, all of us can use like the 15 GB free data that they provide. And, like they reached 800 million daily active users. That's like tremendous. Out of which 5 million started paying. So, they got people to try, and then they got people to buy. Similarly, some of these I've tried myself, like in my previous ventures or the company that I was working for, and found success in a few, but failed in some. So that is how things work. But another, like if I may cite an example which I did at the company that I was working for, after my MBA, was building a network of micro influencers. So I'll quickly run you through, because in the interest of time. So why micro influencers? Because they are trusted, they are brand relevant. Okay, first of all, what are micro influencers? So micro influencers are people who have a decent number of people following them on social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, right? And these are not like regular influencers which have got like millions of followers, but these are micro influencers. So you build a network of micro influencers because because of all these reasons. Uh, and the growth that we were able to achieve was like, which I mean, it speaks for itself. In within a 4 month period, 4 5 month period, we were able to increase our users 4 times. So that's something that we employed ourselves, and like it was an amazing growth hack that we employed at our company itself. Uh, Next up is activation. So after you acquire a lot of people, you need to provide you need to ensure a hassle-free onboarding. Uh, if it's the first time you're a user, he wants to enroll ASAP, and he needs, well, I mean, what they've done is they've gamified the experience of profile building. So you must have seen the completion rate, right? So they help you understand what features LinkedIn has by making you complete that pie of 100% or whatever. I mean, so that I mean, all of us would have done that if we have a LinkedIn profile. But in the process, what happened was we got to know of LinkedIn's features. Then that is something very noteworthy, which helped LinkedIn create a frictionless onboarding process. Ensuring of happy first experience. How can you give the user the aha moment? An amazing first experience. I feel the saying first impression is the last impression is a little bit exaggerated, but first impression definitely is a lasting impression, and you do want to leave a great lasting impression on your customers. Then getting people to make the most out of your product, and this is another thing that one should keep in mind while activating the acquired users. Activation depends on the product offering, so it might be different for different products. You need to hypothesize potential solutions, the impact, and continue to iterate till you find the right answer. It won't be like you are going out there with a certain solution and it will work, right? So you have to. It requires a lot of iterations. One of the famous examples is doing away with credit card details while signing up. Some companies have employed this, whereas some companies are made to make use of this. Something like Netflix, which we all of us use. So we are asked for our credit card details before using the. Next is retention. Today, like, consumers go from channel to channel and device to device before eventually buying. So loyalty to brands is dead. Earlier, it used to be like I'll only wear a BlackBerry shirt, maybe, or I'll only wear Nike shoes, or I'll only buy from Amazon or something like that. But today, loyalty is dead. I mean, people are looking for discounts. They move from brand to brand. They move from platform to platform. Most companies, what they do is, they allocate the lion's share of their budgets not to retaining existing customers, but trying to find new ones. So that is, I feel, one mistake that every early stage entrepreneur might do. I mean, I won't say that everyone does that, but most companies do that. That's what studies say. Like, getting people to coming back for more. This is again, like, if we look at Google Drive's example. I used to think I'd never require more than 15 GB of the drive space that is already being provided by Google, right? But here I am using their annual plan of 100 GB, which is a paid plan. So this growth hack is also reflective of the process of habit creation. So Google made us use their product like day in, day out, and they created a habit. Now we can't get out of it, and then I eventually ended up paying them to use their services. Uh, Only true growth hackers would know the major chunk of revenue is generated by existing customers. It's, and as data says that 70% of the existing customers are definitely going to buy, whereas only 10% of the new customers make a purchase from a website or an app. And this is more for e-commerce industries. 44% companies have a greater focus on acquiring new customers, with only 15% of them focusing on retention. So retention is of utmost importance. As the name suggests, we want to retain our existing customers. We want them to come back to our app only. And the scenarios are different for different segments of companies. Take, for example, Android apps versus e-commerce. On an average, 60 out of 100 users who sign up, so you install an app and by the time it's the third day, 60% of the people drop off. So there's a lot of scope of improvement here. For an e-commerce industry, the likelihood of getting a sale from an existing customer is 60 to 70%, but it's only 5 to 20% for a new customer. So look at this average repeat purchase rate here. So what it says is, after a person makes his first purchase, the likelihood of him making another 47%, and it only goes on increasing. So that is the power of retention, which one needs to keep in mind while setting up businesses. Most successful businesses today get upwards of 70% of their revenue from loyal customers. So that is a big number that you need to focus on. Next is revenue. I think revenue is the most sought after piece in the entire model. Everything that a growth hacker does, ultimately leads to revenue. Think of ways of how you can get people to pay, by making payments easier, by giving them discounts, by eliminating shipping costs or whatever, So when you are setting up a business, you need to have this mindset. So let's say we are running a food delivery business or a food delivery startup. So we need to, keep on doing this user insight sessions or surveys, So let's say we run a survey asking customers to tell us what is their biggest hurdle to place an order. Okay. And from our findings, we get to know that almost 50% of the people don't want to pay for the order before receiving their food. That is when we introduce, something like cash on delivery, So this is something that we'll realize only when we ask our customers or we research on it, So hence these iterations are extremely important. Like I said, ideate, test, analyze, and report. A new industry is flourishing these days, which is around subscription, and I really like it. What it does is it helps companies deal with their negative cash flows. So it takes care of retention. So once a user purchases a subscription model or he subscribed to a service that you are providing, he ought to use your product over and over again, right? It's but natural. And I mean, in India today, there are almost 600 different subscriptions that are being provided by different companies across different sectors. So that's a big number there. And this industry has the potential of becoming the next big thing, I feel. And of course, I mean, like I said, it also helps in retention. Yeah, you need to, while generating revenue, you need to focus on the low hanging fruits. You might come across, you might understand that, the path from revenue to retention is only one stage away, like we saw in the previous slide. But a brand new customer has to go through A's all over again, right? So that is why, making a retained person make a purchase on your app is or on an app or use your service, pay or generate revenue for you is much more fruitful than getting a new customer to do the same. And the last stage of the matrix is referral. So in it, it's fairly important to keep on improving your viral coefficient. So what's a viral coefficient? So it is the number of new customers that each existing customer is able to successfully convert. So something a strategy which is being employed by a lot of people, but which was initially started by this company called Dropbox. So Dropbox is something like G Suite only. So it provides cloud storage, free cloud storage. What Dropbox did was, so on every referral that a person brings, Dropbox started giving free space on their cloud. So let's say I bring in a friend, I get him to sign up on Dropbox, I'll get 1 GB extra. And that's how they built, and they grew to more than 10 million users in like a short span. You need to make sure that you need to create your product in such a way that it can be shared very easily. This is especially for online businesses. Let's say if you're making an app or a website, so you need to make sure that people can share it with people or their friends at just one click. They don't have to go through a lot of processes. Then the importance of NPS. So the willingness to share. So if there is an existing customer, his willingness to share can be captured by doing an NPS survey. So what is an NPS is basically it's asking your customers how likely are they to refer this product to a friend or a colleague of theirs, and this is what it is calculated as. So NPS is basically the percentage of promoters. So on a scale of 10, if we ask this question is to be asked to how likely are they to refer this product, and if they rate us 9 or 10, they would fall under the bracket of promoters. Whereas if they rate us anything through 0 to 6, they'll be counted as detractors. And that's how the an NPS is calculated. So, I mean, it's very important to have a healthy NPS as well to ensure that you have a good referral network working in. That was pretty much about the metrics. And now I think we look at some data metrics. I think we are already we have overshot the time. It's 2:55. So I just keep this slide on for 10 seconds, maybe for you guys to go through if there is anything that anything specific you can ask if time permits for some question answer session, or you can reach out to me separately on my LinkedIn as well. We didn't get time to look at data, but definitely I think he's a creative that you can go through. Like, do not be this kind of a person. Data is of utmost importance. All of us are engineers. We know the importance of data. We should be this one. We should act upon the analysis that we do. We should act upon the data that we see. I think that's pretty much it. Entrepreneurship is not something that you can learn by just reading it in books or listening to people talk about it. People like me talk about it. I'll quote a famous philosopher, Confucius, who said something really amazing in way back in 450 BC. He said, "What I hear, I forget. What I see, I may remember. But what I do, I understand." So similarly, you guys need to step into the world of entrepreneurship, run a pilot, analyze it, go back to the drawing board, and repeat till you find a winning formula. I think, I mean, that's how one should go about it. And like there was a point mentioned in one of my earlier slides about failing. So failing is just a step towards success. I like this story which a famous commentator Harsha Bhogle likes to tell, and even I have found it very, very important and very interesting. This is a story of a cricket, Sri Lanka Marwan in his he was in cricket. He was talented. When he first got a chance to play for his, he and in both match he had the scores of 0 and 0. Of course, he was in the squad. He went back to his domestic seasons in Sri Lankan cricket, and he scored tons of runs, and he eventually got his chance back 17 months later to represent his country, to play for his country. And he played a test match, and he got scores of 0 and 1 in the 2 innings he played. And of course, he was dropped again. Then he again went back to the drawing board. He understood his, where he was failing, and after 3 years, he got another chance. Again, unfortunately for this guy, he got out again he got 2 scores of 0, and he was again dropped from the squad. People started questioning his big match temperament, and maybe they thought that he was not there for the right stage, even though he had the right talent and he kept on performing in domestic circuits. But he never gave up. After being dropped for he scored a pile of runs, and came back roaring to the international circuit. And later he was selected again, and then he went on to captain even Sri Lanka. He amassed 16 centuries, 6 double centuries, and so that's a very interesting story that I like to tell myself and like to share with people to help people keep up their confidence, and never see failures as or rather never see failures as a giving an option to give up. Rather see it as something which is a hurdle which you need to overcome, and I think all of us have it in us to overcome our failures. That's it from my end. If you have any questions, if we have time for that, we can entertain a few. Otherwise, we can sign off. Thanks, guys.
Participants can now ask their respective questions.
Hello, sir. I have one question. As I have read in various books, I've read in various books that there is no place for emotions in business. So,
right,
that there is no place of emotions in business. So, would you like to comment something on that, or can you please share views on this?
Sure. I think emotions are a very important part of everyone's life. But like you said, emotions. People say you should not be too attached to an idea or a business that you are developing. Right? Tomorrow it might end up being the sole reason of your business failing. Because you think that यार ये तो मेरा आइडिया था, मैंने तो उसको मतलब कब से सोचा था कि मुझे ये करना ही है. ठीक है, be open or do not be too attached to an idea. Be open to or be flexible to change along the way. If you think that there are some opportunities that you can pivot your business towards, be open to that. Be open to suggestions. Don't be hell bent on something like यार ये तो मेरा ही आइडिया था, ये मैं ऐसे ही करूँगा. So you're right. I think it's important that you should not let emotions get the better of you. But having said that, it will be your emotions only which will help you drive the growth or the passion. So I think passion is an emotion. So if you don't have the passion, you can't succeed. So of course, at the same time, to have emotions as well. But yeah, there is a thin line between what are good emotions and what are bad. But yeah, so you definitely need to understand what kind of emotions you would want to show while running a business.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one question, Pratik.
Yeah, ma'am.
You have shared various strategies and this pirates metrics and other hacks, related hacks, which are there for the growth of any business.
Yeah.
So, is it that before we start any business, we need to learn these kind of things which are related to it, or we can begin with and then we can improve upon?
Yeah, not really, ma'am. It's not. I mean, it's not necessary that all of us need to have all these skill sets. But while developing a product, like a few examples we saw, while developing a product, we should keep in mind of how we are going to grow this or how we are going to scale up our business. It's not just about setting up, because setting up is just, of course, if you have a good idea, if you have a great execution plan, you start. Okay, so that is helping you start. But what's going to help you grow is is that mindset of growth, right? So to summarize the answer, it's like it's not necessary to learn all of that, but it's important.
Okay.
Yeah, Pratik sir, I have one question. How far can we think of partnership in entrepreneurship? I mean, when it is not a question of financial condition. If financially we are not requiring a partnership, but do you suggest that partnership businesses are like entrepreneurship is fruitful, or we should go for a sole venture? I mean,
right. So it's a double-edged sword actually. One might think that if I'm running a business by myself, I won't have people telling me what to do, and I can run it independently. But at the same time, it's important to have people with the like mindset and some skill set that you don't yourself possess. Okay, so let's say, I'll take a basic example. Like I spoke about running a food startup, right? I might be a good chef. I might know different recipes to cook, but I have zero knowledge of how to take it to the market.
Yes.
Right. So that's where maybe I'd require a person who comes with a certain experience or learnings from the business background, right? And then together with him or her, I can, start my own venture, which can be more successful as again starting by myself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, is any more question available? Okay. So, on behalf of Government College of Engineering, I extend very heartfelt thanks to Pratik. Actually, when Rajeshri ma'am told me that you are a budding entrepreneur available for us, so I took this opportunity that we should have you your session for our students. You being a very young entrepreneur, I thought that my students will have more interaction, but we are really yet to come up to that mark. Okay, Swapnil has one question, but let Swapnil ask the question once I finish my vote of thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. So I have question related to production.
Yeah, Swapnil.
Production of a product.
Okay.
I want to ask that describe a time when you decrease the manufacturing cost of the product. Like which time?
Okay. Which time? Okay. I think that's a fair question. Although I don't have a lot of expertise in the operation space, but I think I'm well placed to answer this question. I don't know if most of us in some at some point in our education or academia, we've learned about economies of scale. So what are economies of scale? Basically, once you start manufacturing in bulk, your cost of manufacturing per product goes on decreasing. Something like what Henry Ford back in when the Ford Motor Company, or it was initial stage of four-wheeler motor cars being manufactured, but the biggest problem of all was the cost of each product. What Henry Ford did was it was a manufacturing setup, Ford company, which of course is well renowned even today. What Henry Ford did, he brought up this technology of conveyor belts. So what conveyor belts did was they increased the manufacturing rate so high and so efficient that the cost got low because they scale, and people could buy the sales in maybe. So what happens is, you want you look overall revenues of a company. So profits can be generated by sales, right? So you're selling a product. Now, if you sell 100 products and you are making 10 rupees from each sale, so let's say you make 1,000 rupees, but you sell 10,000 products, even 1 rupee profit from it will get you more profit than the previous, right? So Swapnil, I think it is important initially, maybe because to lure customers to buy your product, you might give discounts and you might give it at and also because you might not have a factory setup or you have a small, but as you scale up, wherein you can produce at scale, and so that is what a concept called as economies of scale. Maybe you'll understand better, but I think that's my take on it.
Thank you, Gods and Little. Actually, we are working on a startup which is service based. So for that, I have this Thank you.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. You can reach out to me separately as well if you have any other questions related to setting up the business or anything whatsoever.
Sure, sir. I have followed you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think all of you all, I think, would be having LinkedIn profiles, so you can just connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to me.
So, thank you very much, Pratik, for your very informative session. Actually, we had some limitation related platform also. We have viewers on the firm. Therefore, we could not go for very large fee. And now I'm realizing that many of our students have missed a good session. But anyway, we will be having you again on some other day on some new kind of things. And I really appreciate the way you have delivered. You were very resourceful to us. The language was really appreciable. I enjoyed the session, and I am 100% would have enjoyed. And we are really, it was a very nice session. And I'm thankful to Gaugawe sir for his presence throughout the session and having inaugurated the session. Thank you very much, sir. And with your permission, we the session. Okay.
Thank you.
Last thing, please. Session has been coordinated by event coordinator Gracie Bess. She is the girl, and the entire work has been managed by our IIC student team. We have various teams and publicity team, and all those teams work together. So it's institute student team which has coordinated the entire activity.
Right.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Pratik, sir. Thank you, sir.
ma'am.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you.